The static hum of the rotating wind turbines filled the air around me as I trudged through the silt-clogged streets of Ellendor. The sky above, a jagged tapestry of gray and ochre, was an angry reminder of the shatterstorm that had swept through last week, leaving behind not just wreckage but an unsettling quiet. I tugged my hood tighter to block the biting winds, every instinct screaming at me to hurry home. Behind me, the low growl of an Aegis patrol prowled with the eerie precision of predators on the hunt. I peeked through a mesh of cracked metal storefronts, my stomach tightening at the sight of a handful of soldiers darting efficiently past me, their dark green uniforms slick and folded taut over the sleek armory. They moved in synchrony, an ever-present orchestrated ballet designed to intimidate the remnants of our once thriving city into submission. The Aegis was merciless. The group patrolling just moments ago had turned their backs on the chaos of the past. They now stood firm against the tides of rebellion sweeping through the isolated districts. I could not afford to stumble into their line of sight. Not today. Every step echoed the weight of my choices. I was supposed to deliver the message, a beacon of hope passed from the rebels, but an odd sensation gnawed at me as I peered at the looming black walls of the command tower just ahead. It was a fortress bristling with the power to snuff out whatever flicker of resistance still lingered in the hearts of the oppressed. I tightened my jaw, remembering Aria's words from last week, her voice slipping into my mind like liquid iron. If we can just reach the center of the Aegis, we can destabilize them. They fear us because they don't understand what we can do. But what did we mean? Did Aria truly believe that we, the outcasts and the forsaken, had any chance against an army bred from fear itself? I inhaled sharply, suppressing doubt. Every day, I watched families dragged off to the containment zones, left with sorrow instead of defiance. They had become silent witnesses to our doom. I clenched the note in my pocket, its fragile paper as heavy as the boy's mother who had wept last night upon my shoulder. Please, please make them listen. I could still feel that unfathomable ache in her voice. It was the anchor of my resolve, but also a source of unbearable guilt. The lights shifted behind me, the Aegis close enough now that I could almost smell the metal rounding their shoulders. I looked around for an escape, but the streets narrowed, becoming a labyrinthine barcode of broken walls and empty storefronts. I pressed myself against a jagged wall and squeezed my eyes shut for a moment, letting the frantic cadence of their boots pound through the anxiety building within me. My heartbeat echoed a desperate tempo in my ears, every pulse a reminder that I had broken the law just by being here at this hour. As if on cue, the unmistakable whir of drone surveillance sliced through the air, a lurching rush of cold dread washing over me. I needed to find a place to hide, just long enough for them to pass. I ducked into a narrow alleyway, littered with the remnants of lives left forgotten, and pressed my back against the rough stone wall. The buzzing crescendo of the drone grew louder, vibrating through my chest. I sensed the flicker of its cameras scanning, relentlessly efficient. The alley's shadows danced around me, oppressive but familiar. Recollections bled into me, the decaying pieces of old posters from a world before the Aegis had installed their iron rule, vestiges of artists transformed into mere faded memories. I clenched my teeth, the ache for my own lost freedom mingling with anger. As the soft hum of the drone began to envelop me, I found myself yearning for Aria. She was unyielding in her conviction. I admired that more than I ever let on. Then, as if the very universe had conspired to mock me, the drone veered sharply, hovering near my hiding place. My hand instinctively moved to the knife at my belt, the only threadbare protection left. Decisions surged within me, wrestling with fear. Do I make a stand, or do I sink into the shadows and trust the uncertain promise of another day? I needed to act now, before the drone's lens caught the glimmer of my anxious energy. Before I could second, guess the impulse, I channeled Aria's whispered confidence into motion. Crouching low, I slipped farther into the recesses of the alley. The drone swung into the mouth of the alleyway, its surveillance lights flickering. In that singular moment of chaos, I dove into the darkness of an old storage unit. The scent of rust and mildew was suffocating, but there was comfort in the obscurity. I pressed my back against the door, the adrenaline surging through me as anticipation coiled tight in my stomach. The drone's electric whirring faded, melded into the distance. For now, I was shielded by the dust and grime, yet the weight of the message remained with me. The rebellion was building, echoes of Aria's dreams reverberating in my mind. I needed to put this message into the hands of those who truly understood its significance, not just to resist, but to reclaim our voices, our stories, and our power from the clutches of an unstoppable species. I took a deep breath, letting it settle, knowing that every decision would inch me closer to an inevitable confrontation with either freedom or annihilation. The darkness enveloped me, a sanctuary of sorts, but it was only a temporary refuge. The cramped storage unit smelled of old wood and long, forgotten memories, revealing hints of a time before the Aegis cast its pall over Elendor. As the adrenaline began to dull, I realized the weight of the message burned heavier in my pocket. It was a simple equation, the words of hope hungering for action. I could not remain hidden forever. After a few long moments, I steeled myself, moving quietly back to the alley's entrance. The drone's whirring had receded, but the Aegis patrols remained omnipresent. I stepped out into the muted light, casting a cautious glance both ways. A sense of urgency welled up. I had to reach Aria at the Haven before they intercepted me. The Haven was a myth for some, a small pocket of resistance located inside the ruins of an ancient library, just beyond the district's outer reach. It was a safe haven, both in name and spirit, a fortification against the Aegis's overreach that craved to snuff out the flicker of dissent. Aria and the others would be waiting for my next move, if I could make it there alive. The streets closed in as I navigated back alleys, avoiding the main thoroughfares. Each shadow shifted under the pursuit of the security lights scanning above like malevolent eyes that sought to expose the flaws in our silent rebellion. My heart raced against the backdrop of the city, a pulse of hope against a tide of despair. Finally, skirting through an old overgrown path, I reached an inconspicuous door framed in discarded rubble that marked the entrance to the Haven. I rapped it thrice, a secret code that quickly swung the door open. Inside, I felt the atmosphere shift. A mix of wary anticipation blanketed the small space, illuminated only by screens relaying intel on Aegis movements and various maps scattered across the worn tables. Aria met me, eyes intense as they locked onto mine. "Did you deliver the message?" she asked, her voice a fierce whisper. I nodded, but the tremor in my expression revealed everything my lips could not. I saw the patrols. They're getting bolder, more aggressive than hiding behind walls. Your voice piped up. It was Ryan, a lanky kid not much older than me, who had taken on the role of lookout. His sardonic tone belied the tension hanging in the air. They think they're invincible 'cause they got all the fancy tech. They don't know what we can do when we work together. The area cast Ryan a stern look that immediately silenced his bravado. Now's not the time for sarcasm. We have bigger issues right now. How many are with you? Just me, I said, swallowing back frustration. I'm not sure how many more of us can risk getting caught with patrols covering the sector. Patrols need to be distracted, Aria mused, pacing the room, her fingers tapping lightly against her chin. If we can draw some of them deeper into the streets, we can set an ambush. We could slip right under their systems. But that leaves us exposed, Ryan added, a hint of defiance lacing his voice. I don't want any of us caught in the crossfire. I interrupted. I think we should also think about, my voice faltered. The aftermath of the boy's mother's desperate plea echoed through my veins. There are people counting on us. Counted, yes, Aria replied, her frustration igniting. But if we show them our weaknesses instead, we fuel their resolve. If we're out there risking our lives for a few on the run, we're sealing our fate. Their exchange was spiraling toward a clawing intensity. I could see the divide forming between Ryan and Aria, two perspectives clashing against a backdrop of fear. I had to intervene before voices rose higher. Then it's settled, I said, cutting to the heart of the matter. Let's raise the tide, but this time, let's plan without casualties. We could split into smaller groups, one to distract while the others evacuate families. We can't leave them behind. Seeing their expressions spare some of their sharp edges, I knew I had struck the right chord. Did you mean to say there's a chance for hope? Ryan offered, a flicker of rebellion denting his sarcasm. If you choose to believe in it, yes, I responded, but we won't get anywhere unless we act now. Arya nodded slowly, the fire in her eyes burning with conviction again. Then we do this together. We'll gather everyone we can. If we can properly disrupt their patrols, we might have a shot at gathering intel or finding a new safe route. Everyone deserves a chance at a better life, right? The tension in the room shifted. What had begun as a conflict morphed into a shared goal. We worked to compose a plan, scavenging information hidden in stolen records on the Aegis patrols. By the time we finished plotting our ambush and rescue, twilight draped the haven in a cloak of anxious beauty. Hours later, when the shadows stretched across our coordinated hideouts, I crouched low beside Ryan and a handful of others, poised outside the main alley. The air thickened as anticipation rippled through the group, the promise of action licking at our senses. The strategy was sound and simple. While one half of us caused a ruckus a few streets over, signaling an evacuation for those in danger, the other would remain in our corner to retrieve the families trapped in the terrifying grip of the Aegis. As the hum of the patrol drones crept ever closer, it was now or never. We exchanged determined glances, shoulders brushing against one another, an instinctual camaraderie binding us together. Igniting the fuse of rebellion could cost us everything, but to remain silent was to guarantee our extinction. Let's make them remember us, Arya declared, her voice steady with fatalistic resolve. With a final nod exchanging between us, we burst into motion. A blurring ensemble of rebellion racing against the currents encircling our fate, determined to seize our liberation from the heart of the Aegis. The plan was set in motion, but like all seeds planted in earth riddled with uncertainty, I couldn't shake the feeling that their roots were tangled deeper than either they or I understood. Below the surface lay shadows that awaited what might bloom next. I had no way of knowing that within that effervescent promise of chaos, a truth burned brighter than fire, waiting patiently to emerge. The Aegis was only a shadow of the greater darkness that prowled beneath the surface, a reality that intertwined our fate deeper than mere defiance against tyranny. A reality I was just beginning to understand. The night was sharp as glass, yet the air buzzed with an electric tension as we emerged from our hiding spots. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, pushing each of us forward, the mask of darkness cloaking our movements. Every instinct told me that we were walking the edge of a razor, the stakes impossibly high amid the cacophony of the Aegis patrol encircling Elendor. I felt the weight of our choice like an all-encompassing shroud, the message burning a hole in my pocket. It represented hope, yes, but it also held the possibility of our destruction. As we slipped into the back alleys of the city, shadows moved fluidly at our command, eyes flitting toward the beams of surveillance lights, darting across the ground like restless spirits. Ryan led the way, his lanky frame darting confidently between the twisted debris that once comprised the vibrant marketplaces of our memories. Arya followed closely, her determination painting the path ahead, her approach meticulous, each choice calculated. I fell into step alongside them, the purpose igniting my breath as I held the message tightly, a talisman against despair. We congregated near a dimly lit courtyard, hidden under the rotted awning of a long, abandoned restaurant. The whispers of who we could save melded into a shared rhythm, the plans thunderous against the oppressive silence of our surroundings. Their shifting patrols. I caught a glimpse of their new routes earlier, Ryan said, an edge of excitement skewing his voice. A few families are holed up in the apartments 2 blocks from here. If we can manage to lure the patrol away, we can help them. Arya crossed her arms, weighing the consequences. Distracting them is one thing, she said, narrowing her eyes. But we need to ensure the rotation is effective enough to keep them guessing. One wrong signal, and we could lead them straight to the haven. Before I could voice my thoughts, another voice interjected. A newcomer wrapped in frayed fabric, eyes dark and intense. The best distraction might lie in the very heart of the Aegis. If you're really aiming to grab their attention, flag a power surge in their central grid. Its barometric surveillance should trigger immediate alarm, redirecting patrols across the market. In theory, yes, Arya countered, considering the implications. But that's pushing into the lion's den. The command post won't take kindly to anything too close to them. I agree, I chimed in, the unease pooling in my gut. We've heard about the Core Command having advanced defenses activated after hours. We can't risk exposing ourselves just for a glimmer of rebellion. The newcomer's lips curled in a mocking smile. Then I guess you have a choice to make. Stand by while families suffer the Aegis's relentless grip. Or throw your lives for something audacious enough to fuel the fire that is dying in these shadows. The murmurs swirled, doubt mixing with rising fervor at the notion of sacrificing security for liberation. But the strength in his conviction struck a chord. Families like mine were crumbling under the weight of hopelessness, and here we were, squabbling like lost whispers. Maybe we could send a smaller group, I offered cautiously. Set them up for an ambush while we create a diversion elsewhere. It could spread confusion. Arya met my gaze, a flicker of admiration softening her resolve. Fine, we can split into two groups. We get the surveillance grid's attention while the other retrieves families, but we need to synchronize our moves perfectly. I could feel the fate of our mission resting within those words, a delicate balance between courage and consequence. We gathered for a final briefing, my heart romantically entwined with the audacious spark running through each of us. The space hummed softly around us, filled with unease and anticipation as we split into our respective groups. The weight of uncertainty felt heavier with every step toward our fates. Children's laughter echoed from the hollow center of Elendor. The sound danced mockingly against the backdrop of the Aegis encampment. Against my better judgment, I slipped the message into my pocket, steadying against the weight it carried. If we survived this night, we'd use its power to inspire those within the city. If we didn't, well, better to risk everything for one last stand than to live enslaved. The two groups emerged from the shadows and split in opposite directions, covering ground under the muted star-dotted sky. My heart raced as we crept through the deserted pathways toward the command post, our movements deliberate, the silence overwhelming. Across the alley, sparks sparked ahead where Arya and Ryan led their team into the heart of the Aegis's web. The command post loomed larger, a jagged mountain framed by the pale lights pulsing ominously. My hand twitched against the every impulse to withdraw from the momentum pulling me toward chaos. But another part blossomed with hope and challenge. The plan hinged on nothing less than an entire intricate dance upon the edge of calamity. Just as we reached the perimeter of the command post, we monitored the closest patrol route, gauging their movements like hawks tracking potential prey. Suddenly, a tremor rippled through the ground beneath us. Landing gear swiveled and thudded against the pavement. A low rumble commenced as the Aegis gears shifted, cloaked under the night's shroud. "Check the frequency," someone murmured, a flash of panic weaving through the resolve. They're realigning their watch, that was it. Every conflicting plan permeated the air with uncertainty, like a spring waiting to snap. I quickly motioned for the rest of the team to huddle lower. If we don't ignite the fuse now, we're compromised. There's not much time. With a shared glance, the others nodded, a flash of understanding darting between us, our crucial silence singing the weight of binaries deep within us. "You'll need to overload the grids on the upper floors," the newcomer advised, face shadowed but eyes blazing. "I can provide you cover for extraction, but you have to trigger it now." I took a deep breath, the volatility of this moment settling inside the marrow of my bones. "Let's do this." We reached the outer entrance of the command post, quaking under the pressure of urgency. Monitors flickered, patrolling drones zipped above like sentinels, and mechanized arms extended to secure entrance points. But if we could hack their grid and trip the alarm, if we could create a rift and shake the foundation of their oppressive wall, then we might stand a chance. I crouched over a hidden console, fingers racing across terminals that shimmered with ominous sequences. Sweat beaded my forehead, complicating my concentration as I delved into their systems. Primal fear twisted my gut. I had never attempted anything like this. "Orion, keep a lookout," I shouted amid the relentless beeping and whirring on it. His voice echoed with adrenaline. As I strained to decipher the code, I felt the weight of the moment grow a backdrop of fiery urgency. My breath hitched as unfamiliar barriers met my probing fingers. "They have tighter defenses than we anticipated," I hissed as static rippled over the console. "Then crack the shell," the newcomer urged, growing impatient. "We must activate the overload," I gritted my teeth. "I'm trying." A desperation surged through me. The lives we aimed to save were dangling on the threads of my resolve. Delving deeper, I maneuvered through layers of encrypted code, navigating through each line with throbbing intensity. Suddenly, everything jolted against the weight of impending chaos. An alarm blared through the sharp edges of the command post, the siren piercing our composure as it announced our trespass. There onto us, Ryan's shout rang, his gaze darting above, a troll shifting like hawks circling prey. And now, the newcomer's hand cut through the air, signaling with urgency as we locked eyes. "Do it now, before their systems lock us down." I slammed my palm against the button, the command blasting forth a wave of blinding light that erupted against the encroaching shadows, an internal explosion shaking the building to its core. The grid went to chaos, circuits flared and sparked across the command post, clear signals echoing a furious ripple of power surging away from the darkness. Beyond the imminent threat, a cacophony rose patrols veered off course, drawn toward an artificial disturbance, leaving us with a window of opportunity. "Go, evacuate the families," I urged, grabbing the arm of the newcomer. Ryan took the lead as we bolted from the inner sanctum, racing against the falling shadows of alarms blaring around us. Our path dimmed under a rain of neon lights flashing warnings. The adrenaline surged within us as our hearts raced to match the tempo of the chaos we unleashed. Outside, we could see Arya and her team moving with calculated precision. Families began to pour from the apartments, confusion mixing with hope in their eyes as our ambush unfolded, a scene juxtaposed against the harsh alarms blaring around us. "Quickly, this way," Arya shouted, more determined than ever through the throngs of fear. "Fall back," Ryan yelled, ushering families toward the safe exit route we had mapped in an earlier moment of quiet here in the depths of the haven. "We can't betray them now." But a grim realization drew weight as I turned back toward the post. The drone surveillance was shifting back to prioritize our movements. The murmur of danger encroached, and instinct screamed for survival. "Cover the families," I shouted, adrenaline igniting. They stopped the Aegis from regrouping. The others nodded with almost instinctual understanding. Ryan sprinted to take point, pushing civilians toward the periphery, while I danced between instinctual urges and grounding thought. The sirens blared vehemently as chaos unfolded around us, but amidst the roaring alarms, I began to piece together something weighty. This was just the beginning. The shadows of our rebellion unfurled beyond the night's grasp, and soon, clarity hit me. Within the vortex of confusion lay secrets buried in Aegis databases, connections traversing toward deeper questions, darker truths. Could we trust our instincts to drive this rebellion further, or had we unwittingly stepped into a greater peril than we could comprehend? That truth lingered like a specter, haunting me as hope clashed with reality. As our tumultuous escape rapidly morphed into a skirmish against the Aegis, my mind thrummed with overwhelming possibilities, cloaked truths hidden beneath us. Our battle had only just begun, and with it, there lay a mystery sprawling and writhing beneath the surface, waiting for bold seekers to unravel its significance. For the only way to escape now was to conquer the command, that sunken heart of Aegis's power. We had to strike deeper, engage the ghosts of both our fears and haunts hidden in rebellion, demanding liberation from shadows, an existence we dared to reclaim from chains unseen. Aria's command for urgency echoed back to me, her voice both ominous and empowering. Together, we would burn sober and bright amid the darkness that lay ahead, every thread linking toward revelations of unseen worlds unfolding. I pressed forth, hand clutching the paper hidden within my pocket, our message bursting forth, waiting to discover its weighty fate. Little did I know, the threads connecting us would unravel deeper secrets yet untold, propelling those reclaiming their voices toward what lay beneath the surface, and what darkness awaited to reveal itself. The cacophony of sirens and chaotic footsteps filled the air like a frightening symphony, hitting the nerve of every rebel in our midst. The Aegis soldiers' retaliation was swift. I could feel the oppressive weight of their presence closing in on us, suffocating the flicker of hope we had ignited. The plan had set into motion with a chaotic spark, but the aftermath now resembled a wild storm, and we, mere leaves caught adrift in its currents. Move, Aria shouted as we barreled into the depths of the alleyway. The press of bodies tangled with panic and urgency pushed us forward, intent on escaping the onslaught of the Aegis. I glanced back only once, catching a glimpse of the soldiers fanning out behind us, their dark figures slicing through the night like predators in pursuit of prey. Just ahead, Ryan was ushering families into a makeshift barricade, the remnants of an old marketplace that had once buzzed with life and trade. It felt like a ghost town now, alive only with the echoes of our frantic breaths. Over here, I motioned, my eyes scanning for familiar faces within the crowd. My heart crashed against the walls of my chest as I spotted a mother clutching her child, eyes wide with uncertainty. Quickly, we have to keep moving. The sight of them, their panic mirrored in our own, sent a rush of adrenaline surging through my veins. These were the very people we had aimed to save, and yet with every second ticking by, we threatened to lose them to the void of an oppressive regime. Help them. Get them to safety. Those thoughts echoed in my mind as we grouped together, ready to escape through a narrow alleyway that would temporarily shield us from the approaching danger. As we pushed on, shadows stretched across the cracked pavement, reminiscent of the chains that had once bound us all within the Aegis's unscrupulous rule. I recently understood that every moment we fought against that darkness, we propelled ourselves deeper into the unknown. We were players turning the tables in the game of power, and with each step we took, we embraced our shared fate, a thread binding us all toward an uncertain future. It was only when we reached the far end of the alleyway, panting, that I realized we had drawn too close to the command tower. The massive structure loomed menacingly before us, its cold walls a reflection of the very regime we fought against. But before I could voice the concern creeping into my thoughts, a dull thud against the earth reverberated through my bones, a blast from the very heart of that ominous place. "Get down," I yelled, pushing families behind me as several guards emerged from the shadows, weapons drawn. The air whipped into a frenzy, a pulse of panic coursing through my blood. The earlier confidence began to wane as chaos sprouted anew, echoing in the distance like a wild tempest. "A cover fire," Aria shouted, summoning her courage as she pulled her sidearm from her hip. I followed suit. We were better off standing our ground than retreating blindly into the unforgiving unknown. As we faced down the oncoming storm of Aegis soldiers, I felt the weight of our listeners' desperate gaze, a moment of eternity, a possibility to divert fate. "Stay together," I barked, aiming my weapon forward, joining Aria in the fiery midst of it all as we squared against the advancing threat. The moment hung like an electric current, an unheard pulse silently urging us as a collective to seize the heart of this revolution. The guards charged forward, shields gleaming ominously under the gauzy light spilling from the tower, but we couldn't afford to waver. I raised my weapon and squeezed the trigger, the sharp crack reminiscent of freedom resonating from my fingers. The explosive trajectory of my resolve dispersed the stillness, blasting a near path through the glassy barrier of Aegis. With renewed purpose, Arya and I navigated the chaos, moving with both rhythm and intention as if tethered to a collective heartbeat. Every footfall counted, each shot echoed our defiance against encroaching silence. Push forward, Ryan yelled amidst the fray, the street becoming a stage of defiance. As families instinctively huddled behind us, I rushed ahead, seeking to buy time, every moment counting, every breath shading our tight, knit desperation against the insurmountable odds. Just as I thought we might carve out an escape route, the unthinkable happened. The ground trembled anew, sending waves of unease coursing through our beings. A low sputter, followed by a blinding flash, ignited at the base of the command tower. My heart seized. A faint recollection of that haunting conversation about the core data points blinked into visibility. Could the Aegis be deploying a self-destruct mechanism amid our fragile ambush? Fall back, Arya shouted, recognizing the shudder coursing through us. In a heartbeat, reality blurred. There was no longer an escape route. The very core of their power trembled as the system's panic echoed through the pulsating heart of our rebellion. But then clarity struck. The message I smuggled in my pocket surged into focus with an urgency that painted itself in blazing colors. We had needed access to their systems, exposure to their plans. We had shot ourselves towards their vulnerability and turned the tide toward providing an answer to our creeping dread. Arya, the core, I called out, my voice breaking through the chaos. We need to breach it. If this is truly a self-destruct, we may stop them from using it. It's a chance, the chance we could destabilize them from within, disrupt their operation entirely, and cradle the opportunity that sought freedom for us all. Arya's eyes widened with recognition as she nodded, thrusting an edged gaze toward the tower, our only connection to the chaos parlaying beneath the Aegis-controlled domain. Then we push into the belly of the beast. Ryan, take the families to cover, she yelled, her urgency rippling like heat through the fabric of our resolve. Fueled by desperation and an unquenchable spirit, we charged toward the looming entrance, weaving between debris and alarmed soldiers blindly cratering around us. With each step, I felt the disparate vibrations of fear and hope thrumming beneath our feet. The tower's doors swung open, revealing a dimly lit corridor lined with flickering screens, all connected to a nexus no one outside realized held the fragility of our future. The clamor of fleeing footsteps echoed behind us, the families still grasping at strands of hope. My pulse raced. Ryan followed Arya closely behind, squinting at the darkened screens that trembled with electric demands. Access might be limited, I noted, staring at a control panel embedded in the wall. They must have sealed off the terminal from them. The screens flashed warnings, transmitting impossible commands amid the data displays, silhouetted against the shadows cascading in a call for action. Then we'll override it. Arya snapped, determination oozing from every pore as her fingers danced across the controls with fervent precision. We can redirect their systems. Introducing a surge will set off the alarms. It could catalyze a core meltdown. With her deft movements, she circumvented layers of encryption. But then, suddenly, the screens flickered ominously again. I need a bit of distraction. Their gloves are in place, she shouted as the doors behind us flung open. A wave of soldiers swarmed down the corridor, their attempts to stabilize control met with furious spirits refusing to yield. I placed myself at the forefront, weapon raised as the guards faltered, eyes wide, uncertainty punctuating their purposeful threat. A quick shot rang out, the flash blazed the realization of what was about to unfold. Go, I barked, pushing back against their ranks, while Arya continued to work overtime at the controls, sweat streaming down her brow. Time compressed. The air vibrated with echoes of frantic heartbeats. No turning back. Then another shot blinded me as the fire receded. With clenched fists, I pushed against all restraints, unwilling to submit to fear's clutches. This was our opportunity. Arya pulled a lethal combination of codes from the screens, fingers flying like wildfire as she diverted power from the upper levels, activating the self-destruct sequence. "Orion, guard the back," she ordered urgently. "They won't overtake this," he replied with fierce determination. The weight of duty chained him upright, anchored in a storm that threatened to sweep beneath his feet. "I'll hold them off," Arya gasped sharply. "But this is it? Keep them distracted," she typed fervently, moving through flashing lines of text redeploying their own technology against them. I could almost feel the sheer pressure outside, arms reaching, begging for freedom in every constricted breath. Just before I turned to face the approaching soldiers, I caught a word illuminating across the terminal screens: rift. The term beckoned me, drenched in ominous clarity. Distract, enable. If we could draw power from the Nexus, we could configure a breach. In a single moment's flash, I eyed Ryan and nodded before sprinting across the room. "Arya, they'll come for you. Go. Take the families," I yelled, forcing the sentiment into desperation. "Not without you," she shouted, eyes alive with conflict. I skidded to a stop. "Establish the rift. Let them funnel into chaos. I'll meet you outside." Just as her hands worked feverishly, reality cracked beneath the weight of our decisions, and the door swung open, revealing a tide of unyielding soldiers battering down the threshold. Each of us was appraised at our large fate intertwined in this singular moment of choice, confrontation, or alliance. Heart racing with purpose, I turned back just once more, to let Arya see through the panic cluing my gaze, join the rebellion's pulse toward liberation. The soldiers surged forward, and when I finally snapped to the hilt, a flicker of recognition nodded us. A collective breath or moment behind tied to each note scrambling toward success. Then came the darkness. The haze of hysteria found me as chaos reshaped our fate. The time had come. The Aegis would not just merely fade into memory. They would either understand what it meant to destabilize truly, to face the specter of truth that haunted them, or they would find themselves devoured by their own machinations. But before the twilight settled, I knew now that we would chase after the truth, until all our echoes united in the rapture of destiny, or until the very fringes of nothingness consumed our fight. The exit to the command post barreled down, soldiers either flickering or sparking their own caution, their uncertainties revealed by our desperate fight. No longer just whispers of rebellion rattled through darkened alleyways like vagabonds. We were seeds now being sown within the tumultuous storm. The clarity tilted into unison, where hearts beating in tandem would ignite flames pushing deeper against the shadows. And with that realization, I charged ahead, drawn to fracture. With uncertainty weighing heavy in my bones, I forged down the labyrinthine corridors, the path toward an inevitable truth, racing toward the epicenter of every connection, every rift yet untold. The storm would surge, and when it did, I only hoped we would steel our convictions together. Because once the dust settled, and once the shadows faded, we stood to become something more, summoning courage where nobility intertwined with the bittersweet threads of purpose. The moments ahead awaited our imprint, the rebellion fueling each match as we transcended through to what must arise, a fire born anew from the very ashes of our fading darkness. Elendor awaited its reckoning, our response pulsed with fervor, a relentless tide waiting just beyond the horizon. The hallway echoed with the chaotic pulses of our fight as I sprinted toward the core of the command tower, that chilling heart where the Aegis held dominion over the city. My breath was a ragged mantra, the sharp intake fueling determination that surged within me. Shadows danced on the metallic walls, each flicker a reminder of the darkness we faced, not just from the Aegis, but from the fear that lived within our people. "Hold the line," Ryan shouted behind me, his voice threading through the cacophony as he and Arya took defensive positions. The heavy thud of boots reverberated against the floor, a reminder that our time was short. I could almost feel the pressure, the weight of lives clinging to our resolve as we carved our destiny, each heartbeat sinking to an uncertain rhythm of necessity. Suddenly, alarms blared and crimson lights pulsed in warning, cascading through the corridors like an ominous reminder of the choices we'd made. Incredible, I breathed disbelief wrapping around me. The self-destruct countdown we initiated had triggered systemic chaos. Screens exploded with vivid imagery, exposing Aegis's interlinked networks, fracturing their command structure. Our plan had worked, but now we had to push through the disarray before they could stabilize. Area, Ryan, I called amidst the tumult, urgency prickling against the ticking clock. We need to reach the data core. If we can tap into it, we can expose their intel and reveal their conflicts with the people. I glanced at Ryan, who huddled in the shadows, eyes wide with determination. The people need to see what the Aegis is hiding. I'll cover you, Ryan echoed, already moving toward a doorway that flanked us, scanning for threats. But we can't linger here. Families are depending on us. Each scrupulous second thudded against my instinct, reminding me that any delay could spell disaster for all we had hoped to achieve. We pressed on, racing down the dim corridor, the air growing thick with the scent of burnt technology and the frantic buzz of overhead drones. I swiftly leaned against the wall, muscles tense as I scanned the blizzard of flickering lights and monitors, each projecting disjointed images of chaos that danced like specters haunting our resolve. Ryan and Area fell close in line behind me, reinforcing my urge to push forward. Together, we ignited embers destined to transmute into a roaring flame. Abruptly, I skidded to a halt at a door engraved with Aegis insignia, entry to the data core. A harsh red light glared above it, illuminating the tangible barricade standing between us and the secrets waiting to be unearthed. Ryan, can you bypass this? I asked, gesturing toward the panel beside the door. He nodded, scrambling forward, fingers flying across the console in a desperate attempt to override the security protocols. I'll try, but it's heavily fortified. This isn't just an open invitation. Do what you can, I urged, stepping back to monitor the surroundings. The echoes of footsteps thundered around us, a reminder that the Aegis was regaining its composure. But I also knew this was the crossroads, our moment to lay bare the fabric of their control. With every pulse of my heart, the stakes rose, the weight of the message in my pocket pressing against my flesh, a testament of hope. Come on, I whispered under my breath, eyes locked on Ryan's frantic movements. Area kept a vigilant watch, poised like a soldier prepared for battle, but her gaze flickered between uncertainty and determination. She felt the gravity of our fight as deeply as I did. Ryan leaned closer, beads of sweat collecting on his brow as he furiously input command sequences. This is taking longer than I thought. I'm locked out of their mainframe. Panic laced his voice, and a surge of urgency propelled me forward. How about a reset? I suggested, spotting a blinking switch on the wall. An emergency override intended to disable security. I reached out, fingers brushing against its surface, heart hammering at the thought of what we were about to unleash. Area's eyes widened. No, that could set off alarms everywhere. We won't have time to. I pressed it without waiting for further debate. The lights around us flickered as the air became charged with energy, a storm that promised liberation or annihilation. Orion, you need to push through. Now, I shouted as the lights plunged into darkness before the system rebooted, paving the way. With a resounding thud, the door slid open, revealing a vast chamber illuminated by rows of green screens displaying hard-coded data. Ryan's grin emerged from the tension. He swept aside the impossible aura of anxiety surrounding him. I'm in, he exclaimed, fingers dancing across columns of code. I need as much time as you can buy me. Area turned and leveled her weapon, eyes narrowed as she prepared for the inevitable fight to follow. We hold the line. We don't let anyone breach this position until Ryan exposes everything. Then let's keep them at bay. I took my position beside her, adrenaline surging again as we steadied our grips. Ready, the shutters on the chamber door whispered faint echoes of chaos trailing behind us, and we knew the Aegis would not allow us to escape unchallenged. Then the floodgates opened. The door burst inward, and a wave of guards surged toward us, weapons raised, intentions clear. The sudden collapse of silence ruptured into a cacophony of shouts and gunfire as we fought back, instinctively moving into a rhythm shaped by desperation and tenacity. We pressed forward, adrenaline fueling every movement, the gunfire reverberating against the walls, a symphony of raw intention and fervor. "Keep them pinned," I yelled as I ducked and dodged the incoming fire, countering with swift returns of my own. "We're almost there," Orion shouted from behind us, his voice barely audible amid the thunder of battle. "Just need a few more seconds to crack this. You have to buy me time." Arya caught my eye, the unspoken resolve shimmering between us. "They'll break soon," she urged, leaning against the frame, her breathing synchronized against the echo of gunshots. "We just need to hold." But before she could finish, an explosion rippled through the core, splintering overhead panels and showering dust upon us. The lights flickered, giving just enough time to see figures blurring in the shadows, shifting like involuntary marionettes. "It is too much," Orion cried, frustration lacing his tone as chaos swarmed around him. "The databases are collapsing." "Orion," I barked. Don't lose faith, keep pushing. You're the key." Just as I said it, another wave of guards descended upon us, a wall of darkened figures that seemed to rise against the backdrop of our desperation. In that moment, hope collided with despair as we were forced back against a wall of encroaching turmoil, inching closer to the precipice of annihilation. Yet we stood resolute, defiant against the current. And as I turned back to Ryan, I saw that he was locked in concentration, windows flashing across screens as secrets tried to escape the collapsing net. "Almost there," he echoed softly, but I could feel the tremors of doubt weighing heavy, each second stretching against the urgency mounting around us. Each shot fired rang like a judge, condemning us to a fate we dared not consider. "Ryan, faster, just a little longer." I pushed forward, the pressure coiling tighter as we faced the onslaught together. As the blaring alarms shook the very foundation, the walls began to crumble and the screens flickered, fizzling into static. One last gasp echoed through the veins of this chamber, a culmination of hope and despair dancing at the precipice of our reckoning. The searing clash of gunfire mixed with the chaotic shouts of soldiers pressed against time, creating a grotesque atmosphere that thrummed around us. The tension circled like a predator, waiting for the moment of weakness. Suddenly, Ryan's fingers flew across the controls, no longer merely reacting, but instead embracing the currents that danced before him, unlocking hidden truths, unveiling tightly guarded secrets buried beneath encrypted mishaps. Then it happened. Every screen lit up with data streaming as the Aegis's systems began collapsing under the strain. "It's all here," Ryan shouted, eyes wide. "Documents, contracts, intel on their deepest secrets. We need to show the families the people." The tide shifted. Hope surged anew as the words lifted into a crescendo, chasing every lingering shadow from our hearts. I glanced at Arya, and that flicker of resolve ignited the flames of urgency surging through us. "Bring it down," I shouted, and together we burst into the fray, moving swiftly to guard Ryan, while he uploaded the information straight to external networks, releasing hidden truths into the hands of the people. With each passing moment, the Aegis suit tightened, the looming presence seeking to wrestle from us the potential glimpses of power. Gunfire echoed around us, and panic surged again, but suddenly, through the chaos arose a sharp crackling, and the chamber brightened into incandescent flashes. "Activate the rift," Arya trumpeted, voice steady with confident ferocity. "It's time to pull the strings." Ryan's fingers met the controls one last time, unleashing violent waves of energy that coursed through the base like a runaway wildfire imbued with our hopes and dreams. Monitors exploded into vibrant light, cascading income tides of cascading data streamed free, spreading out beyond our reach, connecting to the very beings that mattered. In the midst of that moment, it all penetrated me, the realization that all we had fought for now wove into the depths of our struggle, becoming one unified banner of insurgents. Exposure, we armed ourselves for this war, not merely soldiers or distorted shadows, but for people rising beyond the confines of suppression and vulnerability. The flickers of dawn we had long feared sparked back into being as people powered one another forward, igniting flames fanning out through the heart of Elendor, illuminating every attrition that had languished in the shadows. But amid that brilliant light, we felt the unwavering force of the Aegis closing in. We could almost taste the desperation of retaliation, clawing its way toward us, their last attempt to reclaim control of what they had lost. They would come, and they would come fast, but we had the kindling. We had the truth, and that was something they could never steal again. As the rift surged, both chaos and purpose erupted beneath us. We were propelled forward, a tumultuous wave crashing against iron reins desperately clinging to a crumbled empire. An audacious movement that would shake our foundations, opening fissures into the endless pulse of rebellion. Together, Arya shouted, eyes alight with fierce determination, igniting paths through shadows that beckoned for light. And as I plunged head first into the heart of the storm, feet planted firm against the obliteration behind me, I realized we were no longer mere fighters clutching at opportunity. We had become an army, unified against an empire blinded by its own fracturing greed, rendering us an unstoppable force captivating the city in a consuming tide. The darkness no longer defined us. We instead danced to the pulse of every conviction igniting within us. As we pushed forward, hearts brimming with fire, pulled the strings of destiny, and nothing, not even the might of the Aegis, could extinguish that spirit. We surged toward the promise of dawn, a beacon of hope untouched, threading between the currents that lingered behind, daring to liberate the voices that remained subjugated amidst the chaos, as we sought to reshape our future from the ashes of despair. And as the dawn broke high above Elendor, we began to explore the true nature of freedom, unleashing our potential into the world, prepared to challenge the darkness, to reclaim the stories that once lay dormant, nurturing the embers of rebellion that would blaze into our new reality. The sun broke over Elendor, casting a golden wash across the tattered buildings that had seen far too much devastation. What had once been mere shadows of defiance evolved into vivid memories bursting with the colors of rebellion. Each heartbeat echoed with the rhythm of resilience. After our chaotic escape from the Aegis command post, we emerged not just as survivors but as architects of our destinies. The marketplace was quiet as families flooded into their streets, carrying hushed murmurs of hope in their hearts. Ryan, Arya, and I stood shoulder to shoulder, still trembling from the adrenaline rush, yet steady in our newfound purpose. In those moments, the cascading truth of our victory reverberated across the space that once contained fear, now reshaped by the clap of liberation. We had unleashed the hidden truth from within the core of Aegis, a wellspring of information to awaken the spirit of our people. Look, Ryan said breathlessly, pointing toward the horizon where pixelated banners now danced above our city's skyline, a sign of a fractured control slowly morphing into a mosaic of our shared experience. They're awakening. There's no way they'll ignore the truths we exposed. The area nodded, eyes darting along the streets filled with people who began to gather, their whispers growing louder, igniting embers of excitement. It's time to strike while the iron is hot. We've sown the seeds of defiance, but we must direct that energy wisely. Preparing for the next phase, I echoed, shoving the remnants of lingering fatigue aside. Some might see this victory as a mere skirmish. We need to guide it into something massive, a movement. The gravity of my words turned into a palpable silence, yet the thrumming resonance of determination soon returned. That collective heartbeat drove me to step forward, raising my voice against the quiet that had wrapped around us like a fog. Let the city of Elendor hear us. Today marks our chance to reclaim what was lost, what was stolen. Together we form a web of strength, drawing in every last soul burdened by chains unseen. Ryan looked up, eyes sparking with a fervent light, and soon others joined in, echoing each syllable that resonated through streets once filled with despair. Before long, a chorus rose around us, voices merging together in a tapestry of purpose, a phoenix rising from the ashes. Well said, Arya chimed, her expression steadfast, but we need to organize this before the Aegis reacts. They won't take this lying down. We need to form a council, a leadership structure that properly positions our newfound strength. No single person can do this alone. As we move through the crowd, gathering together leaders from various factions, a conversation began to churn about what to do next. Ideas collided in a tempest of urgency as we wove plans amidst laughter and anger, harmonizing dreams with the heartbeats of people reclaiming their existence. Hours passed, and under the watchmen of scattered sunlight breaking through the clouds, Elendor transformed. An awakening pulsed vigorously, echoing throughout the neighborhoods, resonating with tales laced with hope. Every pair of hands worked tirelessly, crafting banners from fabric salvaged from the wreckage, their messages of solidarity rising high toward the dilapidated spans of buildings that would be embraced by the spirit of revolt. As evening approached, I felt the joy of camaraderie while the crush of responsibility surged through our veins. Flickering lights illuminated the square where we had gathered, newly minted faces embraced in unity. "It's beautiful," Ryan said, a rare smile warming his features. "I never thought I'd see this place alive again." A sudden hush enveloped the crowd. I turned, eyes landing on a figure moving toward us, his dark silhouette sharp against the glow of the preparations. It was Lorien, a well-known figure amongst the underground resistance. He approached with purpose, his presence commanding the attention of those around. "People of Elendor," he called, raising his arms to quell the murmurs. "We stand at an intersection of fate and rebellion. The very seams of our city have begun to unravel under the weight of truths we no longer choose to hide. The Aegis lies wounded, but we dare not underestimate them. They will react, and we must act decisively." Lorien's words rippled through the crowd, drawing them closer, hearts beating in synchrony. To win our fight, we must transform this spark of liberty into the inferno of freedom for all. Together, we will reclaim our story, our future, and will do so not in isolation, but as one unified front. Cheers erupted, ringing high above the city as the crowd began to chant his words. I felt heat enveloping my chest. The collective energy clashed sweetly against the cool breeze coming up from the riverbanks that whispered secrets of grace. But beneath that elation, a chill settled. Each echoing heartbeat reminded me we stood on the precipice of uncertainty. The Aegis would not turn away quietly. They would strike, and we needed to anticipate their moves if we aimed to dismantle a power that had dominated our lives for far too long. As the council meeting commenced in a rhythm of powerful discourse, I caught glimpses of Arya moving amidst the crowd, absorbing the energy while still honing strategies to fortify our defenses. Everyone brought their strengths, the tech savants mixing with the street, savvy tacticians. Every voice was heard around the circle formed between presents and futures. Ideas rippled like waves towards me as I locked eyes with her once more. "What do we need to do next?" I asked. "Forge alliances," she replied, her gaze focused, clarity harnessing her essence. "We need to connect with the underground factions and collect intelligence on how the Aegis is reacting. Then we push them to crumble under the magnitude of their own schemes." A surge of determination rippled through me, intertwined with fear, but we had moved through darkness into a dawning light. "Let's spread out, then. We'll gather every last cell of resistance." That night, the moon rose against a tapestry of stars, and we dispersed into the city's veins, a multitude of shadows converging upon the core of our shared mission. I felt the weight of our cause behind me, the legacy of every child who once dreamed of a realm untainted by oppression. But just as hope began to crystallize into purpose, the ripple of lights shimmered with purpose. Unbeknownst to me, a shadow slipped beneath, carving pathways forged in secrecy. Days passed into weeks. We formed a council spanning every faction, strategizing around maps spread across underground locations, embedding accidents into reports, scripts, and fragments stolen from the Aegis's plans. Whispers of revolution filled Elendor, growing steadily louder. We set forth to weave our collective stories into an uprising impossible to extinguish. But the Aegis, cutting and cold, pulled together their forces against the tides of change. The atmosphere turned restless as whispers of rumors escaped into the night. Our fears took form in the shape of obsidian walls and soulless soldiers lurking just beyond reach. The danger loomed closer. What could we muster against their residual wrath? The stakes continued to rise, and it dawned on me that every delay meant giving them the upper hand. One evening, as I plotted alongside the council, chaos struck. A seismic disturbance shuddered through the underground where we gathered, lights flickering as alarms rang out. "Ryan, area," I shouted amidst the chaos. I felt panic enveloping the small sanctuary we had crafted. "What's happening?" "Patrols moving in," Ryan replied, eyes wide. "They're attacking." Without hesitation, we surged forth towards the narrow exit, hearts beating in unison. "We need to evacuate," Area snapped, forming a barricade to shield our retreating council. "They can't capture us here, everyone move." We barricaded the doors to buy time, but the enormity of the Aegis's forces pressed against us. Bathed in urgency and despair, our actions morphed into frantic motions. "Get everyone out through the back," I yelled, forcing my way through amidst the smoke, ball tangling in the air as I braced for what lay ahead. "We need to scatter and regroup." I knew we had little time. They would strike hard and fast, and chaos would rage as we fought to preserve our movement. Together, we navigated the shadows, weaving pathways carefully under the looming threat of incalculable force. But then, the unthinkable happened. A flash erupted near the corner, illuminating stark silhouettes advancing towards us. The Aegis had found us heavily armed, more menacing than I had ever experienced firsthand. Our council wouldn't make it through. We were trapped. "Push through. Move," Area urged me as we stumbled into the growing swarm, fueled by sheer will and ignited heartbeats. The realities of our situation shattered the remnants of bravado. "Hold the line," Ryan called again amidst the darkened chaos. But the intensity shifted as shouts morphed into cries while sand filtered through the cracks in our ambitions. The Aegis was no longer just an enemy. They were venomous, relentless, spiraling into our ranks to snuff out any flicker of hope. Panic coursed through me, but it didn't anchor me. It steeled my resolve. "We'll meet again," I shouted to Ryan and Area, knowing they would hear amid the din. "We'll give them hell." And as fragments of light glared upon us, the oncoming storm surged forth, bodies crashing through what felt like eternity, fate catching a light in flames from the remnants of our fragile humanity. There, I spotted a battered exit, the chaos swirling surrounding us. I had to move. Today, Elendor would either reclaim its narrative or succumb to the silence enforced through fear. As I plunged through the exit towards the waiting darkness, every breath thundering through my chest, hope grappling with despair. I was not just fighting for rebellion. My hope rested on reclaiming every shred of existence. The battle for Elendor had reached a fever pitch, and though the tides turned against us for now, we would resist. Our story had yet to finish, an ember still flickering amid a storm, daring to reshape destinies amidst the chaos. I would seek the truth hidden within nightmares because it resided there, waiting for rebels to awaken to it. Through blood and hysteria, by fire and resilience, we would rise again, reflecting light and life into each crack of oblivion, assuring Elendor that courage would reclaim all threads, weaving a tapestry reborn from ash and rage. As I tore into the obscuring night, the pulse of rebellion drove deeper, a charge of energy igniting the promise of tomorrow. We wouldn't back down, we would rise, and within that conviction, the dawn awaited, an echo beyond the struggles, daring to reshape everything we held dear. The silence that engulfed the dim corridor of the Aegis command tower was everything but comforting. I could feel the pulse of my heartbeat resonating through the walls, matching the tension that hung thick in the air. The last moments had been a blur, a violent clash, smoke swirling, and echoes of cries pulling at the very fabric of my resolve. Now, as I stepped through the chaotic aftermath, I felt the weight of the message I held deep within my pocket. It was a whisper of hope, and it was time to rally again. We had escaped the initial wave of the Aegis attack with lives intact, but momentum weighed heavily on us. Ryan and Area scouted ahead, their expressions grim but unmistakably determined. For every corner we turned, a familiar sense of urgency had seized my heart. A storm brewing outside, the city poised on the brink of awakening or collapse. "But have you checked the perimeter?" I asked, catching up with Arya, who was leaning against the cracked wall, studying a flickering monitor displaying chaotic energy surges. "Ryan's out there on lookout," she replied, her voice steady. "But he reported escalating troop movements. We need to get to the mainframe and upload the data we retrieved. It will expose everything: their plans, their funding, the people they've betrayed. This could be our last chance to turn the tide." An audible breath left me. The magnitude of what was at stake churned within me like a tempest. "If we can breach the core, we can cascade the upload across their systems. This will spread to the citizens, everyone who still remains under their thumb." "Exactly," she nodded, a grim smile forming. "But we need to move quickly. We might not have much time left before they realize the data breach." Racing against the clock, the scent of burnt resin and metal clung to the air around us, leading us through restless corridors where the past clashed with present realities. We climbed higher, reaching the austere feeling of the upper levels where shadows quivered against the stark lighting. An omnipresent awareness scrambling across the walls, heavy with anticipation. Through a series of narrow walks and echoing chambers, we finally reached the heart of Aegis, the mainframe control room. The door creaked open, revealing a cavernous space fortified with steel and glass, a central console streaming with raw data, illuminated commands pulsating with a life of their own. "Here we go," I whispered as I stepped inside, my voice barely breaking the imposing silence. A cold chill racked through my core. The magnitude of our task resonated with every step I took toward the glow of the screens, reflecting the chaos we had stirred in this very place only hours before. "Ryan," Arya called out, beckoning him to join us. "We need cover while we work." Emerging from the shadows, Ryan slid inside, his eyes flickering between the digital displays and the press of building anxiety. "The guards have ramped up their patrols. Every second we waste is a second closer they come for us." "Let's make every second count," I affirmed, employing every ounce of urgency that coursed through me as I approached the central console. "While I work on the upload, Ryan, you and Arya will need to cover the exits. We cannot allow anyone in or out while this data transmits." I quickly keyed into the console, my fingers racing over the interface. Lines of code erupted onto the screen, revealing incomprehensible data streams climbing in swathes that throbbed with color. But they were just numbers. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs. None of this meant anything unless I could break through their security protocols and siphon the truth that would ignite a revolution. "Come on," I murmured to myself, narrowing my focus. The words seemed to cease existing as the code began folding into itself, the pressure near suffocating, a vapor growing in the hollow of my chest. Outside, the distant echo of footsteps pattered closer. My pulse quickened, and I could see Ryan leaning against the wall, scanning, his weapon drawn and ready. Arya stood poised beside him, her expression fierce as she awaited the oncoming threat. Just as I began cracking deeper into the Aegis's fiery lockdown security, the console emitted an ear-splitting alarm, pulsing red lights showering the room in a menacing glow. "They're onto us," I shouted, breathing jagged. "I need just a few more moments, Arya," Ryan called, scanning the entrance, voices becoming increasingly frantic as the walls echoed their determination. "We might not hold them off for long. Focus on the data," Arya shouted back. "We'll keep them back." The crack of gunfire was met with the surge of life from the mainframe, and I could feel my focus sharpen. The lines of code shifted beneath my fingers, sparks jumping as I broke through layers of encoding. I pushed deeper into their digital veins, unearthing file after file, evidence that the people of Elendor deserved to witness. We would tear away the curtain of oppression and expose the very heart of their schemes. Suddenly, I felt the console vibrate beneath my hands, a surge of power illuminating the screens. I'd hit the motherlode. A coordination of dark deeds, funding streams channeling into mercenaries, directives to quell dissent. It laid exposed in full spectrum color before my eyes. Each document tinged with a reality that would rattle our oppressors to their core. Almost there, I yelled as the alarms blared, a forceful crescendo drowning out Ryan and Aria's shouts. I have to finalize the upload, just a few more lines. The gunfire erupted outside. I heard Ryan exchange shots, exchanging fire in a rhythm mirrored by our desperate breath. But I was so close. I could feel it. The weight of the message demanding to be unleashed. "Hold them off!" I shouted again, diving deep into the final interface commands. The digital floodgate of the mainframe trembled beneath my fingertips as the thoughts raced through my mind. The people needed to see. They needed to hear. In a final moment, I felt my fingers dance over the command key, and as I pressed upload, the console erupted with a brilliance that glinted across the walls. The data began to stream out, cascading like a waterfall into the extensive networks leading back to the streets of Elendor. But it was more than that. It would just be the spark igniting a wildfire of rebellion. Yes, I cheered, a grin spreading across my face, the rush of hope buoying my spirit. We did it. But the room darkened suddenly as the emergency lights flickered, followed by a bone-chilling silence. The sensation of dread coiling in my gut was unmistakable. They had reacted too fast. An infiltrator surged in through the door as alarms blared all around us. "Retreat," Ryan yelled as an Aegis squadron flooded the room. "Go now," Aria urged, her eyes fiery, pushing Ryan toward me as we took a collective step back towards the exit. As we turned to flee, the echoes of chaos ensued, shouts crashing against the surge of gunfire that exploded behind us. The Aegis soldiers advanced, their rigid formation an intimidating wall closing in, like tides threatening to consume rocks on a shore. "Move," I shouted, the fear igniting a sense of urgency within me. "We can't let them stop us, not now." We darted down the darkened hallway, the echoes of our footfalls reverberating as blaring alarms trailed behind us. I could feel the weight of the message nestled in my pocket. It would change everything, but only if we could get it into the hands of the people. Flickering lights overhead illuminated the pathway as we raced toward the way out. Just outside, the chaos of the streets awaited. Rebels clashed against Aegis patrols, and families were spilling into the alleyways, desperate to escape the oncoming violence. The streets thrummed with a wild energy, the lifeblood of the resistance pulsating with raw determination. Aria and Ryan continued to press forward. Each of us fought side by side, dodging patrols as we blazed through the nearby square. It was all on the line now. Our entire future rested on our ability to make it out unscathed. But as we rounded the corner, an imposing figure stepped into our path. It was Lorien, one of the resistance leaders. His armor was now scuffed and battered, his expression reflecting the weight of so many losses. "What happened?" he barked, scanning us all with concern. "We have the evidence," Ryan declared, but before he could say more, the unmistakable whir of drones above us caught our attention, hostile flashlights scanning through the darkness. We had to move. There wasn't time for explanations. "Get everyone to the Haven," I urged Lorien, my voice rang with urgency. "The data has to reach the entire network. It could turn the tide here. The people need to know." With a nod of understanding, Lorien turned, shouting commands to his squadron. "Everyone, to the Haven, move now. Let's go." I urged my two comrades, sprinting beside them through the chaotic melee unfolding before us. Families rallied round, uncertainty etched into their faces as the call cemented a fire within our ranks. We were making our way toward the unfamiliar alleys leading to the old library, the heart of our coordination. It would be our sanctuary, the place where we could funnel the truth back into the lives of those too long oppressed. As we pressed deeper into the bowels of Elendor, the distant sounds of conflict faded slightly into the muffled echoes of uncertainty navigating the night. But I could feel the gravity of the moment the Aegis would retaliate. But now, more than ever, a fervent wave of determination coursed through our veins. The future was suspended amidst shadows of trepidation giving way to flames of resilience. Together, we would ignite a revolution, setting aflame a path towards liberation. But we had to survive this night. And as we emerged, I felt hope spark again. The flicker of defiance awakened amongst the people, ready to elevate us toward a new awakening. We would not only survive, we would thrive, carving a legacy from our struggles and breathing life into the story we longed to reclaim. As we neared the haven, the glow of a gathering fire glimmered in the distance, not just a beacon but a promise. The promise of renewal. The flames of rebellion were lit, and with every step we took, we reshaped fate against the darkness that once held us captive. Elendor awaited, but we would not yield. We would rise anew, tenacious, unyielding, and undeniably alive. The dawning horizon broke at long last. The spark ignited, ready to blaze into the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. Dawn broke over Elendor, its radiant light spilling over the remains of what had once been a city steeped in fear, but now transformed into a crucible of hope. The clash between the shadows of the past and the flickering promise of the future painted a glorious, if tentative, tableau across the skyline. As I stepped into the vibrant swirl of people gathered around the haven, the remnants of anguish and uncertainty gave way to a pulse of fervent energy, a collective heartbeat surging toward liberation. And now, I shouted, raising my voice to pierce through the din as clusters of resistance fighters turned their heads toward me. We fought through the darkness, and we're alive because we dared to dream, a dream to unshackle ourselves from the Aegis's iron grip. The crowd murmured, a tremor of anticipation weaving through them. I could sense their collective hunger for change, the same swirling energy that had propelled us through tumultuous nights. Ryan and Arya stood beside me, steadfast. The resolve mirrored in their eyes was an unspoken alliance reinforcing the moment we had dared to seize. Listen and listen well. Lorien's voice soared over the gathered throng as he joined me at the forefront, the flames of rebellion casting fierce shadows across his face. We have hacked into the core of Aegis, a revelation that exposes their deepest secrets, their lies, and their brutal oppression. The truth is within our grasp. More murmurs, louder this time, a symphony of voices rising together. With every breath, I could feel the revelations coursing through the crowd like an electric current, a denial of darkness igniting paths forward. This would not be an ending. This was a beginning and awakening. The time has come to obliterate the chains that bind us, I urged, adrenaline surging through me like wildfire. Those who have hidden in the shadows will be illuminated by the truth we've unearthed. This moment is ours to define. We shall reclaim our story. Arya stepped forward, drawing an audible breath. We need to unify every faction, every individual willing to stand against oppression. The moment we weaken the Aegis stronghold, we will pull down the walls they have fortified for too long. We will ignite this revolution in a way they cannot silence. Agreed. Ryan chimed in, arms raised amidst the growing clamor. They've tried to bury us beneath layers of fear. Now is our chance to bury their power in the same way. And as the resonance of their words rippled through the gathering crowd, I could see the tension makings of warriors in their eyes. Fire long dimmed, flickering brightly in the hearts that had waited far too long for this day. We were on the precipice of something monumental, a rift opening before us, urging us to leap. Suddenly, the shriek of sirens once more twisted through Elendor's boundaries, a mad reminder that the Aegis was still lurking. My heart sank momentarily, dread creeping in. They can't be here yet, I proclaimed, desperate to erase the thought that enveloped my mind. We've organized and prepared for this. They won't crush us unprepared like before. Around me, faces hardened, ice formed over nerves of steel, and the fire of rebellion ignited once more. We stand united, Lorien bellowed, rallying the fight in us once again. Our spirits will not be dampened by fear. We are a multitude, and together we will split the Aegis's hold on our city for good. Make your voices heard, I commanded, sensing an awakening stewing in every heart bound together. Shout for freedom, let their fear ripple before us. The crowd erupted in collective shouts, vast and unyielding, a crescendo that drowned out the ailing sirens that met the shadows. Together, We roared for the rebellion we clicked into existence, a celebration honoring every sacrifice amassed over these tumultuous nights and blinding battles. As the sound washed over me, a pulse of energy coursed through the assembly. We were once a tapestry of fragmented stories, stifled by silence and fear. But now we rose, stitched together by ideals of anguish transformed into purpose. Once the truth has been broadcasted, I continued, my voice rising over the thunderous call of our revolution, the very foundation of Aegis will tremble. They are running out of time, the cities will awaken, one heart at a time. United, we can dismantle their walls, just as the sunlight crested the horizon, spilling forth a torrent of golden light. I saw movement in the distance, the shadows coalescing into Aegis patrols. Relief rose within me as I caught glimpses of familiar resistance forces sprinting forward to our aid. "Oh, look," someone shouted, pointing past the growing wall of apprehension that threatened to sweep over us. "We aren't alone." In a radiant flash, a new faction joined, a glimpse of hope manifesting before our eyes. Those who thought strolling the line between shadows and light, fueled by our cries, took their place at the forefront of our united front. This wasn't merely our moment, it was theirs too, the family we had forged as we voyaged through darkness. A wave of battle cries surged, challenging every ounce of fear rooted in the past as we turned toward the incoming patrols. There, standing on the precipice, flanked by figures draped in rebellion, I witnessed the true scope of our power, a collective army, deeper than mere skin. We were an embodiment of resistance. I raised my weapon, heart pounding like war drums, and shouted, today, we rise together, march on, we seize this moment, and we surged forth. The cries of liberation intertwined with bursts of fire, illuminating the horizon. Our collective resistance came alive, arising from under a slew of oppressive darkness that the Aegis had cast upon us for far too long. As we charged toward the oncoming darkness, the sound of our voices resonated, with each step echoing the heartbeat of those who had fallen before us. We were the torchbearers for Elendor, filled with stories, courage, and untamed dreams of a future unshackled from tyranny. And as we hurtled forward, the very foundations of the past quaked beneath us. It was a glorious day, one that would be etched into the hearts of all who dared to dream of brighter days. Then, as we clashed with the Aegis forces, the unmistakable rush of adrenaline surged through me. Each weapon ignited with energy, each salvo propelled toward dismantling the oppressive structures that bound our existence. In the fury of battle, I could feel the weight of what we fought for. The stakes loomed large, and I pushed my spirit to honor every struggle we had faced. The truth was too powerful. A mosaic of lives ignited as we surged forth, bound together with strands of valor, relentless and defiant. Arya stood by my side, the fire clashing against the oncoming shadows of Aegis soldiers as they prepared to retaliate. "Stay focused," she shouted, her voice grounding me amidst the chaos. "We can't let their fear deter us now." I took in the sight all around. The determination echoed back in every sapphire gaze, fire igniting our spirits as we pressed onward against the tide, forging through solid lines of soldiers glaring back at us. We had unmade the chains of one clashing moment, challenging the weight of our rebellion. Pushed through, together, I yelled again, each word punctuated by the echoes of strife. "We are the spark, and we won't be silenced." The ground shook beneath an avalanche of clashes, the collective pulse of humanity forging a path against tyranny. We rallied together, the foundation of our revolution growing, and the lives we sought to honor surged through us, driving every ounce of courage. And as I weaved through the fray, I saw them civilians, those who had once hidden in the shadows now joining ranks, inspired by the truth we had dared to uncover. The energy surged. We would outmatch the Aegis at last. Together, we drove forward into the core of Elendor, the irrefutable heartbeat affirming what we had become. A tidal wave crashing through the oppressive barriers that once stifled our very existence. And in that rush, in that instinctual push toward reclaiming our future, I felt a deep understanding settle within. The battle was not just for survival. It was for awakening, for each story untold, each dream dormant in a state of rebellion, waiting for its moment to rise again. As we roared into the heart of conflict, every shout became a promise that the shadows would not win, that the truth in our hearts would radiate against the cold hearts of our oppressors. And as the sun ascended above us, bathing the horizon in shades of gold, I knew we would prevail. Today, the revolution might waver against the darkness emerging anew, but Elendor would awaken as one, a symphony rising against the night. Many moments of struggle still lay ahead, but together we would pierce through the very fabric of oppression, igniting the flame of liberation, a fire that would burn bright amidst our struggles, and weave through the tapestry of our people, a light shimmering against the encroaching shadows. Elendor had begun to reclaim its soul. We would reunite against the tide, rising to meet the banners of freedom aloft over our city. We rallied against the storm that had sought to extinguish us forever. Together, we would forge not only a new beginning but an enduring legacy, a future forged in unity and illuminated by the truth. And through it all, we would remain unbreakable, champions of our story, defenders of the light, illuminating the path of long, buried dreams fighting to break free. We would embrace the dawn. Elendor would rise. We would not back down. Today, in our hearts, we would finally reclaim our voices together, unstoppable and forever free.